am Orlando Jones, and I just want you to know that the Moana Nui Podcast will be starting soon. Stay tuned, yo.
I'm Veronica Taylor, and from myself and Ash Ketchum, I just want to say, Moana Nui, I choose you!
Aloha mai kako, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Moana Nui Podcast. We are here for our June segment of Develop Your Talent with our partner, the Center for Asian Pacific American Women. Tonight, we are going to be discussing Listen to My Voice and how our guests are leveraging their voice and their platforms to positively impact the world and their communities. My name is Moana McAdams, and I am the co-host of the Moana Nui Podcast, normally joined by Dana Morgan, but she is off doing some setup for Ranger Stop and Pop Atlanta this weekend. So if you're looking for a fun convention, go downtown to Atlanta and check that out. Dana will be there doing exclusive interviews with your favorite Power Rangers for the Moana Nui Podcast. It's going to be a good time. For me, I will be at AwesomeCon here in DC. So come on down to the Washington, DC Convention Center this Friday to Sunday. We'll be there with our comic book series, The Wildcard Chronicles, our children's book series, The Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea, and just really there to have fun and engage with our community and our friends. So come down and see us. AwesomeCon's always a great time. So with that said, I am going to introduce our wonderful host tonight, our friend, our fairy godmother, Sue Ann Hong. She is the CEO of the Center for Asian Pacific American Women. And as always, it is a pleasure to partner with her here on this show and all of the other wonderful things that she is doing to help the AANHPI community. So with that said, I'm going to bring Sue Ann up. Aloha, Sue Ann.
Hello. It's always a privilege and an honor to be here with you and Dana.
Yes. We're excited. So before we get started, I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. This is kind of a special episode because we are joined by our Apali Sisterhood, and it's really great to see these ladies in this forum. So we'll start with Gigi. Gigi is the Senior Merchandising Manager for Tory Richard, vertical retailer of resort wear in Honolulu, Hawaii. Gigi grew up in Hong Kong and Honolulu and has lived and traveled to various countries across Asia, Europe, and North America. She's one of the 23 women accepted into the 2023 Apali cohort, a signature leadership program by the Center for Asian Pacific American Women. Having worked in apparel merchandising for most of her career, Gigi specializes in merchandise planning and product strategies. She strives to better herself and have a positive effect to others in any way that she can. In her spare time, she enjoys traveling, cooking, learning a new craft, running, and spending time with her husband, parents, and 2 rescue dogs. So let us welcome Gigi to our show tonight. Aloha, Gigi.
Aloha, how are you?
Doing well.
Fantastic. I'm so honored to be here. It is, thank you so much for inviting me to the show. It's such a great honor. I've never done a podcast before, so it is my first time, and I am so excited to be part of this.
Awesome. Our next guest is Erin. Erin is a proud second-generation Filipina-American tech entrepreneur, Silicon Valley native born and raised. She's also known as an internationally acclaimed author of the 2019 O'Reilly Media's Creating Augmented and Virtual Realities, Theory and Practice for Next Generation Spatial Computing. Early in her career, Erin worked as official paid electoral campaign staff for Ro Khanna for Congress and Obama for America in 2012. For over a decade, Erin has been sought out to advocate serving numerous nonprofit organization boards. In 2015, she co-founded Philippine X Americans in STEAM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics, FASTER, where she serves as the national board president. She is a UC Berkeley alumnus. Her chapbook, 16 Dimensions, composed of over a decade's spoken word and page poetry, is currently in production. So let us welcome Erin to the show as well. Aloha, Erin.
Aloha. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. It's a pleasure. And then last but certainly not least, Alice is an inventor, social entrepreneur, CEO of So Light Design and CUS95 Incorporated. She's a former professor in architecture and material technology at Columbia University and Parsons the New School. Fueled by her passion for helping the underserved, Alice invented products that address the world crisis. Her first invention, the solar puff, has impacted over 1 million people living in underserved regions worldwide. She has won numerous awards, including the U.S. Patent Award for Humanity, and her inventions have exhibited at MoMA, the Modern Museum of Art in New York City, in 2019, and she was featured in Hillary Clinton's book, The Book of Gutsy Women, Fast Company honoree for World Changing Idea in 2022, Marie Claire Power Trip 2022 honoree for the most influential women, 2022 Forbes 50/50 Impact honoree, and also being featured in Apple TV docuseries Gutsy, episode 6 with Hillary Clinton. And Alex has also been featured on ABC Good Morning America on her recent mission to Ukraine. So let us welcome Alice to the show. Welcome, ladies. Welcome, Alice. Aloha.
Thank you so much for having us. It's an honor to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Sue-Ann to take us through tonight's episode. For those who are watching, please feel free to engage with our panelists in the conversation. You can ask questions in the comments, and we will be answering those as we go along tonight. So enjoy the episode, everybody. Oh, Sue-Ann, you're on mute. Sorry.
I'm just having a little soliloquy here. So welcome, everyone, and thank you again for joining us tonight. And I am especially excited about this particular episode because it is about Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander women using their voice. Now, if you think about the stereotype of that soft, demure, speak only when spoken to, how many of us in our culture was told these messages when we were little? And somehow it translates into other places of work, and from my situation, place of corporate. And that affected the way that I led, the way that people saw me. And so tonight, I want you to really think about how these three incredible leaders are using their voice, how they develop their voice, and what can you do as you think through amplifying your own voice. So with that, please put your comments in the comment section. If you have questions, don't wait till the end because these are incredible women. So let me start with Alice first. And just, can you talk a little bit about your background? And I'm asking each of you, what one fond memory do you have about your family? So Alice.
Well, I grew up in Korea. I immigrated when I was 4 years old, and we lived in a very poor neighborhood outside of Syracuse. And I remember my parents, my father being an architect and my mother was an artist, and they would make our own furniture. My mother would paint like tapestry and then make clothes out of them. And I remember having the weirdest outfits growing up and being embarrassed to go to school because she would dress me in these weird outfits that she made for me. And thinking back now, I think those were like the most creative inventions that, I was totally embarrassed as a kid, but thinking back, I think it took a lot of balls and a lot of creativity for my mom to do that, to send her kids off to school in these creations. And yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And I think that that instilled that creativity, the using of imagination is something that was instilled in me early on. And I consider it a real blessing now.
I was going to say you are definitely influencing that creativity and innovation. And so I can't wait for you guys to hear more about Alice in a little bit. But what about you, Erin?
I think for me, it has to be those house parties in the 90s where if you're Filipino, breakdancing, any element of hip hop is just like home. So my brother and his friends would cut up linoleum that we had from our old floors that we would tile, and they would breakdance on it in the backyard on our red deck. And my cousin also is a DJ, so he's best friends with DJ Rocky Rock, which is the Black Eyed Peas DJ. So having that, I still have pictures of it. It's one of my favorites whenever I talk about my family. That's what I usually show. Like, there's me, trying to figure out how to baby scratch. It's really hard to actually DJ. And maybe the second one would just be artwork my dad kept for years of a painting I had at Easter. It's like watercolor, and it's not great. But both my brother and my dad, they're actually really amazing visual artists. So, I think for us, as much as I'm an advocate for science and technology, where that's like a value at home, with like mom is a molecular biologist, dad is a toxicologist, like art was always present, and karaoke and things like that. And I was a choir girl growing up for like 10 years. So I think when I think of that, it's a series of like memories that really just express joy.
I'm just trying to imagine you breakdancing in the back. I'm just saying. I think that would be it. I love it. I love it. Gigi, what about you?
Well, so I am a Chinese American from Hong Kong. My parents took my sister and myself, and we immigrated to Hawaii back in 1996, just right before Hong Kong was handed over back to China. So, I was a teenager when we first came to the U.S. Part of my, growing up was in Hong Kong, and part of it was in Hawaii. Definitely, I remember, because I came to the States when I was at that age that kids are they're forming their own clique. So, high school time was definitely very challenging. And then, my parents were already really hardworking people back in Hong Kong. And just as with many immigrants, right, they came to the States and they had to take up just jobs they're not familiar with. And they will take up, multiple jobs at a time and just like work their butts off really to give me and my sister a comfortable upbringing and kind of like, we wanted to do these study abroad things and they will pay for it. As my parents also love to travel and, they would talk about wanting to travel after their retirements. And they both retired during COVID. So they weren't really able to do any of that during the first year and a half. So really one of my fond memories I have with my family is really from last fall. Me and my sister decided to leave the husbands, leave her kids, leave my dogs, and just took my parents to a big trip in Europe. And, we went to some of the most iconic cities, and it's really pure joy for me seeing how much my parents enjoyed it. Just, after all that they have done for us, it's really wonderful to be able to finally do something for them and kind of take them on an adventure. So that was my fond memory with my family.
Love that. Travel as a way to bond. That's awesome. So let me ask you this. So can you share with the audience, what is it that you do, and provide a little bit of context around that? And then how did you end up as this thing that you're doing right now? How has this become a passion for you? So Erin, can you share with the audience?
Sure. So I've been coding since I was 8 years old. So software engineer and computational designer. I think I just wanted to make websites. So most people, when you think about nerdy engineers, they do back-end engineering where design and humanities last. For me, that was first. I started off as a front-end engineer. Again, like I mentioned earlier, my family works in tech. So my parents worked in biotech for 30 years. My dad works on the COVID-19 vaccine. So science is a value and a way of life, not like, it's not just a belief, it's just a way of living that was just ingrained into me growing up, where my parents were like, you should double major in computer science and computational biology and get your PhD, which I did not want to do that. But, having the entrepreneurial mindset from Silicon Valley, my mom was also an entrepreneur, and she worked in R&D for startups around solving different cancers. So between that and my brother, whose early career was in games as a game tester at EA Electronic Arts and now works in health tech, having the nonprofit was so natural to me for FASTER, Filipinx Americans in STEAM, because both of my parents were so involved in the community. Like my mom was the only, I think, licensed Filipino veterinarian in Northern California, and they had every single member in biotech. So they built out their communities. Up to now, everyone's, retiring, or when someone gets laid off, tries to find a job, you had a support system. So, for me, with FASTER and also with ALA, Asian Leaders Alliance, which, I used to serve on the leadership team of that organization, which represents 1,000 plus now tech and corporate employee resource groups. If you're Asian American, you find yourself, and the higher you move up into executive roles or as a founder and investor, we're very much still underrepresented in the room. So even if half of Silicon Valley's employees are Asian American, we're not getting promoted at the ranks that we should be. There's still a lot of disparity. So I think, having that, ingrained in me growing up, and now continuing on passing that, that it was like a nonprofit. I was helping my mom found when I was 18, and then now doing it, in my, I think it was like my late 20s and now 30s. And now I'm trying to think of like the next thing of like, how do I continue on that legacy to sustain? That's, kind of where that comes from. And I think for me, a lot of the hobbies that I have, because I've had other careers, like I worked in civic engagement, and now I'm trying to figure out if it's games and film, as it intersects with technology and whatnot. All of that, I think, comes from a deep connection to community with family and our professions, where, our hobbies are like, we turn it into like our job almost. And, for me, there's always an intersection also with art and technology that I think is also really unique, especially with Filipino Americans as well.
I love the fact that you are integrating the left and the right brain, right? In terms of STEAM.
Absolutely. I'm like, the A's in STEAM, there's arts, there's design. I know there's still engineering stuff, but I'm like, it's all connected. I really consider it being an interdisciplinary type of mindset.
Absolutely. The creativity and the innovation, like I talked about. The other thing I wanted to point out is when you think about representation, you guys, McKinsey and Lean In, they do this big women in the workplace study every year. 1 in 4 women in C-suite, 1 in 20 women of color in C-suite, 1 in 50 ANHPI women in C-suite. We got some work to do. And guess what? This is all part of it, is how you develop that voice. So I love the field that you're in, Erin, and making that you're paving the way, and your mom started it. I love that. Gigi, what about you?
Well, it's kind of related to my mother as well. My mother was always in apparel business. And so she worked in clothing manufacturing when she was younger, and she was a small boutique owner. She's definitely has that entrepreneur mindset, before. So that was before we moved to the US, and in Hawaii, she worked as a tailor until she retired. So kind of naturally for me, when I first started college, I refused to even entertain the apparel design and merchandising program. I was secretly interested, but I was like at that rebellious stage. I was like, I don't want to follow my mother's footsteps. I want to do something else. So of course, then I eventually, started really taking classes in the field, and then, the rest is history. I was really interested in it, and eventually graduated with a degree in apparel design and merchandising. And I've always had my career in this field, whether it be in e-commerce. I was I definitely was in at the selling side for a while. Whatever position I was in, I was always very passionate about, the apparel and the retail industry. So, kind of landed where I am, and kind of in the merchandising field a number of years ago, and just started really growing in the direction I'm in. So so that's and I'm it's just, I can talk all about merchandising and how to kind of plan your business plan and making sure that you are maximizing your KPI. I can talk about that all day.
Gigi, one thing, what took you over? You didn't want to be in merchandising. You didn't want to be in what pushed you over?
What pushed me over? I think it really, I've always interested in it. It was just like kind of a, almost like a refusal. Well, this is what my mom wanted me to do. This is what my mom, think that I should do. So I don't want to do it. But then I think it just eventually I was like, there's a class and I should take it, and I'm gonna see if it will work out, and I think that did it. I started taking classes, and mind you, my mom would be like kind of helping me and commenting on my homework back then, and it's always like there's always a fight, right? But then at the end, it's the love. I do love this field.
Yeah. I know we don't want to listen to our moms sometimes. It is what it is. Alice, what about you? How in the world did you end up inventing solar lights, for goodness sakes, and change? What did you do?
So, I had my son in 2004, and we were going to the doctor's office so often. He had asthma, and there's a saying, a worried mom does better research than the FBI. And so I did so much research on why there were so many kids with asthma in the doctor's office in New York City. And it turned out that 75% of the pollution comes from energy consumption in buildings, fossil fuels. The pollution is so intense that it's actually changing our genetics as a human species. Like when we were young, having celery and peanut butter was a really good snack for kids. And now you can't touch a school with a peanut or anything like a nut for miles. So at that point, I decided to focus on solar energy, because the sun is, free energy. It comes to the earth. It's the most powerful source of energy that comes to the earth every day. And I was teaching material technology at Columbia University, and the trend in material technology is everything's getting thinner, lighter, faster, stronger, smarter. And I was sewing solar panels to fabric and thin substrates. And then, I always say that there's never a straight line in terms of fate or destiny, or, the journey that you're taking. There's always going to be forks in the road, and a few steps back and a few forward all the time. So, and you have your day to day, but then you have these moments of chaos that affect you, or serendipity, things that you don't expect, that you have to overcome and are challenged with, that maybe you've never been challenged by before. And you have to either rise up to that challenge, or you lean back and become a witness. So after witnessing so many natural disasters occur more frequently, when the Haiti earthquake happened, I decided to step in and change my curriculum around at Columbia. And I asked the dean if I could change my curriculum to be an innovation studio to help Haiti, because, natural disaster after natural disaster, this is going to keep happening. And he let me, and we basically did a whole bunch of research on Haiti, and it turned out they were just a microcosm of what was happening globally. They were the extreme poverty. People were living on $3 a day, and they were spending 30% of their income on kerosene to light their world at night. And most of the country was not electrified. And globally, 2.6 billion people have no access to electricity, and they use kerosene. So I researched every solar light out there on the market, and they were all heavy, bulky, hard plastic, non-recyclable. And I grew up doing origami as an Asian. My mother taught me origami, and the whole idea of folding and flat packing and transforming form so that it takes up less space, so you can fit more in a carton for deployment. And I was inspired by the origami balloon. And so this one is our most recent one, which we launched today. And it basically pops open into a cube. And it also has a USB-C port to charge your phone. And it has a really big solar panel, a larger solar panel, so that you can actually harness enough energy to charge a phone. A lot of the other solar panels, solar chargers are too small, the solar area, and it would take 2 weeks to charge that battery. So anyway, so that's an example of using the origami, the Asian art of folding paper, and applying it to a solution for light. And also using solar, you're actually giving people money back, so that they don't have to spend money on kerosene. They can use that for food, clothing, education. And when I found that out, I decided, that's a win-win situation. And that's when I decided to become a social entrepreneur. So fast forward 7 years, we launched the first product. Now we're launching I think it's our 8th product. And we've impacted millions of lives worldwide. And I just came back from Ukraine to deliver lights to children with PTSD in Kyiv and Lviv. And I just came back from Turkey, delivering lights to many children in tent camps, because so many people after the earthquake, they have no homes. And right now, temporary housing are tents, and they usually end up staying there for 5 years. So I think they call it transitional housing. And when I go to these places, my passion is really to help people and make lives better. I feel like I always say that I think God has given me this courage or bravery to be able to go to these red zones to help people. And that's where I get my fulfillment, in terms of, this is why I'm here, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because when I see these kids' faces light up and smile after these incredible atrocities that they've gone through, I feel like everything, all the hardship and all of the pain and suffering I've gone through as an entrepreneur, it's worth it.
I just think that what you're doing is absolutely incredible. And again, taking your creativity, applying it to science, again, that left brain, right brain, Erin. So incredible, and just the lives that you're impacting. So let me ask you this about voice. So when was the first time, or when did you know you had a voice, that you could speak out or speak passionately about something in particular, and how did you harness that, Erin?
Like I said before, I've always been a singer at a young age. In Filipino, you're just taught, like, go perform with all the aunties and uncles, all the karaoke songs are at church. So that was just a practice. Spoken word and hip hop, poetry, that always it came to me, a little bit later. But that also was something we saw growing up. As an activist, I was probably the person always organizing the rallies if I wasn't behind the bullhorn, but I didn't get arrested throughout college and was it high school? And I was a journalist also. I forgot to mention that before. During my career in civic engagement, I was a journalist for Philippine News, Change.org, and Hyphen Magazine. So, doing a lot of that writing, covering politics, youth, entertainment. I think with journalism, you're taught to be like objective, like it wasn't my own opinion. But I think in the coverage and like historical documentation of like uplifting other voices of like the things that they were doing, that has always been a part of me. Like writing has always been a medium and a practice, and that changes depending on the format. So for example, television and film and screenwriting is very different than poetry. It's different than a fictional novel. It's different than a technical book that I released. I did not know my first book was going to be a technical book. I had no idea. I thought I would be writing like something like Amy Tan was like a blogger and a journalist. Like, so all of those different things, I think how I use my voice has just always translated from writing in a different medium. And then when it wasn't that writing, it was like advocacy and organizing. So even in tech, it's like when I talk about the words justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, to me, that's like my ethnic studies in practice in what you would consider like the tech and corporate setting. Like to me, activism is defined in many different ways. It's not just protesting something where it's like, maybe that's not effective. Maybe lobbying is effective. Maybe that's not your jam. Maybe it's, direct service community work or social entrepreneurship or a nonprofit. Like there's many different ways. And so how you actively practice and activate your voice, I think it's fluid, right? It's just a matter of, during a point in time, like I think when Alice spoke about, this is what happened with, whether it's Haiti or different issues, you felt sort of that calling. And so for me, I didn't mention it before. I was an immigrant rights activist when I first started out. I organized on the DREAM Act since high school because of my mentors and because of people in my family facing deportation, and everyone's safe, and people change their papers and fix things, but a lot of our communities are still facing real issues with that, or even housing and home ownership. I was working on Occupy Wall Street. I day trade now, but like I would be the last person you would think that would care about crypto and day trading when I was like, I was a digital organizer for Occupy Wall Street. So, I thought about in the communities, Filipino American communities, among Asian Americans had the highest home ownership rate, but also the highest foreclosure rate in 2008. So, when I think about how do I activate my voice, it's more than just, what I write and how I express myself professionally or day to day. It's also my previous careers and why I chose to do what I did, which I really wear my heart on my sleeve. Most people know that I'm pretty outspoken in that regard. But I think I just encourage, many other women, especially like you said, Asian American women and women of color. We are, basically like told to be very submissive and demure and quiet. And I just was not always those things. Or if I wasn't speaking in class, but I was like, oh, I'm writing, I'm like creating poetry or something at a young age. So yeah.
I love the fact that you have all these different ways and mediums to express what it is that you're trying to do, both from a journalism, but, you've got all these other, social media, speaking engagements. You have like an arsenal of things that you do to speak your mind and what's going on. Oh, sorry, that's my little Yorkie. But the other thing is, by the way, Amy Tan. Now, did you know that she actually sang in a rock band with Steve? What's his name? The one that does the horror films. And I'm like, she's in leather pants singing around. So
I love Amy Tan.
I was like,
my jam record.
Yes. So I actually, when I interviewed her, brought the recording of her singing. So that was really new.
Never knew that. It's amazing.
Wow.
So, yeah, exactly. And so Gigi, what about you? Like, when did you know?
First of all, before I answer that question, I really want to just say, can you guys hear me? First of all,
yes,
okay.
Much better.
Much better.
Perfect. Well, we know who the newbie is, right?
All good.
And first of all, I really wanted to say, like the things that you do, Alice and Aaron, is just amazing. I mean, and I'm all about sustainability. Living on an island and not having a lot of resources here. Everything has to be shipped here. So I just really admire what you do, Alice, and I really want to talk to you more about if there is any opportunity to kind of expand it here. But going back to how I discover how I discover my voice, I think in a way I always been using it without really realize I'm using it, like in small ways only, right? I would vote, I would participate in marches, and maybe donate and volunteer to organizations that I'm passionate about. But growing up in a Chinese immigrant household, kind of echoing what Sue-Ann was saying earlier, pretty much I was programmed to have a great work ethic, keep my head down, do my job well, and really avoid conflict. That's really kind of my parents' philosophy. Bless them, I love them, but that's their philosophy. I definitely am a late bloomer compared to my fellow panelists. As definitely most of my earlier work life, I would do that, work, do a good job, and go with the flow, even if there's something that bothers me. So then as I get older, I started to realize this kind of keep your head down kind of tactic really isn't going to help me get any further, I do have an opinion, I have a point of view, and I feel that I can benefit my organization by speaking up. So, luckily I do have the opportunity to work with some great mentors. And just with their encouragement, I started to just kind of little by little speaking up, and it does take efforts. And I think one of the things I did find most helpful is preparation. To make yourself heard in a meeting, you do have to know the subject matter, be prepared to ask questions and answer questions, and present your point of view eloquently to really present yourself as someone with something important to say. So, that would be kind of my growing process.
I love that. And by the way, we're not going to be able to get to the topic of executive presence. I think that's going to have to be another segment. But Alice, what about you? How do you know? How did you know?
This is such a great question, Sue-Ann, and I really can so relate to both Aaron and Gigi, all of your stories of how you found your voice and relationship with family, and understanding that we're part of a larger whole where we learn things from our mentors and people that we're inspired by, like people that we read, and something sparks energy inside of us and creates an incentive for us to be like them and model ourselves somehow differently, evolve ourselves differently from these mentors. And then also teachers in our lives, and they could be, not. I had a lot of terrible teachers in elementary school, and my elementary school actually shut down at a certain point. They closed it all down, but I'm just really grateful for just one or two fantastic teachers that instilled a mentorship and love and admiration into my life that gave me courage and inspired me to do more, to work harder, to excel in ways that were not average. And I think that especially in Asian culture, a lot of us have parents that come from generations of trauma, post-war, immigrating to a new country. That's huge amount of stress, and psychologically. And so the children that grow up in those families in the new country, they have the weight of that somehow. And I think part of our challenge as kids is to find our own identity. And that's where, I can relate to Gigi, and being challenged to be different, because it's so daunting, the kind of pressure that our parents, especially Asian parents, put on their kids. It's so hard to live up to their expectations, because they realize how hard life is, and you can't blame them. But as children growing up, you really struggle for your own identity. And I was pathologically shy when I was little. I was so afraid to speak up in public. But when I was in school, in architecture school, you are forced, regular, courses, at the end you have a final exam. But in architecture, you have to pin up your work and models, and you have to speak, and you have to defend your work publicly in front of a jury. And so doing that actually really helped me to start speaking about my work. But it was only until I found a point where I found something that was larger than myself, that I keep telling people, I wouldn't be doing this if it was just about me. If it was just about money, but when I realized the impact that it would have on my son's future and his children's future, that if I could have some sort of impact on their lives, then it's worth it for me. So at that point where it becomes something larger than myself, there's no amount of energy or passion or kind of strength that, you'll be able to exhume from from the depths of your soul when you find that moment of passing that threshold of finding something larger than yourself, and the courage comes.
I love that. It's that tying to whatever it is that you're doing to a mission and a vision of what it is that you're trying to do for the greater good. And you did it for your son, and that's just so inspiring, And so let me ask each of you a question around building constituency, because when you're using your voice, when you're trying to get your message out, you are building a constituency and you're growing that constituency. How are you doing that? Can you give some specific examples of how you do that, just to give some tips and hints for our audience as you're talking about voice? So Gigi?
So I think for me is really the first thing to do is just to put myself out there. I'm an INTJ, so I am the thoughtful analyst. I'm also an introvert, so I'm not naturally I'm not a marketer. So having to talk to people, advocate for myself, it didn't come easy for me. So at work, for example, I really do have to take the initiative and the steps to reach out to other department managers, store managers, stakeholders who would affect what I do, and schedule regular meetings with them. And definitely bring ideas, information that would benefit the other party when you come to these meetings, so then the other side finds it valuable for them as well. And, it really wasn't something that I could do naturally. So I definitely have to constantly remind myself to do it. But once I started doing it, it's quite easy to notice that the opportunity really is everywhere. Aside from work, of course, joining an organization that really resonates with you and align with your values, I think that's important. So, and that could provide you with a support system. For me, CAPAW, definitely, being in the Poly program, it's really open up so much. I have 20 something sisters now to kind of bounce off ideas with, utilizing social media such as LinkedIn, and really just seize any opportunities. When someone asks you to speak as a panelist at their podcast, you say yes. Even though it might be a little nerve-wracking, just put yourself out there and be kind, be friendly, and I think that's how you can build your constituency.
And I appreciate you showing up, Gigi. I love it. She's like, it's the first time I'm doing it. I'm like, well, then that's a perfect start.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. So, Alice, what about you? How do you build constituency?
Well, I guess I have a lot of I don't know. I just try really hard to create relationships with people and be as authentic and real as possible when I'm speaking to new people or building relationships. And I try. I'm an emphatic. I mean, I'm constantly wanting to help people and learn about people. I love people so much, and it's something that is, it's a curiosity in me where I really want to find out about people's past and what they're interested in and what they like to do and what brought them to, be here. And that always helps in terms of building relationships and making long-lasting relationships and creating a bond. And also, it's an incredible, I'm realizing that it's almost essential for business, being an entrepreneur, and building a following, not because you want to be followed, but because you really just believe in what you're doing. And people are drawn to authenticity.
Absolutely. And, one of the things, Alice, I remember just having a conversation with you initially, just when we first met, our initial call, is just how genuine you came across. And frankly, I like to do business with people I like. and
yeah, exactly.
And trust.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that takes a little bit of time, right, to build that trust. And it's always through that relationship, because the funding or whatever may not come, but I don't go away just because I don't get funded,
exactly.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, Erin, what about you? How do you build constituency?
So I think for me, as an former organizer for Obama for America, you always have a base of some community. So that can be college for me. I was involved in it was a Berkeley AAPI alumni chapter, church, beyond. Everything to me is everyone is just an extension of family. Someone that's like, if you're Asian American, you're Filipino, I'm like, oh, you're family. I'll be like, and if you don't self-identify as a person of color, I'll be like, you're and it's like my industry homie of this thing, right? And professionally, it's important to be visible. Representation is important. So, I've always been very dedicated to that work, as much as some people hate identity politics. For me, it's like, this is just a part of who I am and how I've always been taught to build community. Liberation work important is actually very essential in that regard. And with Faster, the story when I started that too, I was just trying to help students, and I was maybe going to be a meetup, at different tech companies to have some entrepreneurs or something like that come in, and we help students. So most people don't know that I did not have an employee resource group, and I did not know ALA existed at the time. We were founded around the same time, but we had no idea about each other, even though there are Filipino American employee resource groups that are housed underneath the Asian American and Pacific Islander employee resource groups. So for me, I created spaces that didn't exist before, just for folks in my own ethnic community in my industry. Like, there's a handful of us that were in AR and VR or in AI or whatever. I was just trying to collect friends, because honestly, coming in from a career in civic engagement, transitioning, I was like, I went to one conference like years before with it was for Dado Bonatao's foundation. If people don't know Dado, he was a pioneer and one of 3 people of color in Homebrew Computer Club with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. So he's a self-made entrepreneur and he has a foundation that's supporting the Philippines in innovation. And so for me, going to those conferences, with my parents or with my friends growing up, there was a base, although it's very focused on like Asia as opposed to the United States. I think for me, I was trying to find, I was like, so where are all the other high net worth individuals that could write a check to Ro Khanna? Because most of the rooms I was in, it was self-made folks who were CTOs of Silicon Valley, a lot of the pioneers, but most of the rooms were cis, straight, white, male. Occasionally, if they were Asian, they were South Asian or East Asian American. Rarely a woman. If they were white. And I was trying to figure out how am I building a fundraising constituency base if the district we're representing, Congressional District 17, which represents Fremont all the way to Cupertino. So it's the first Asian American district outside of a majority district outside of Hawaii. So the highest voting ethnicities and populations were Chinese, Indian, Filipino, and Vietnamese. And most of those folks are working class. They're not necessarily all entrepreneurs in tech. Some are there, but it's very hard to find that list. So I was trying to make that, part of my central focus when I was leaving the campaign. And after I'd left it, just finding that community, it's like, oh, well, there's not a lot of us. Or, hey, there actually are folks that identify as me from my ethnic community or racial identity. And so outside of that, as a woman, other professional groups. So I started off with meetups. So before my other nonprofit, we had shut that down after a couple of years, and I was teaching classes on AR and VR at Cisco while my co-founders taught at Unity. It started off as a meetup. So, how many different Twitter lists I've had over the years of Asian American journalists who are part of AAJA, LinkedIn, Google groups for authors and speakers, a lot of the lawyers in Silicon Valley who founded their nonprofits, and professional development groups as a part of the Lean In movement. I think I was just so connected to naturally being an evangelist for your cause. Like I was an evangelist for women who code. And for me, it's always about helping. Like you want to get a job in tech, we want to learn. How are you serving your community? What do you share? And this is a transformational sort of relationship, not a transactional one. I think when we say the word networking, people automatically go, oh, I can't do that. I'm like really shy, or it's like gross because people just want something from me, right? So I try to not frame it that way and try to make it more personable so that, like I want to develop with you in this sort of like friendship for something that we like to do, if that makes sense. It's much more soft when you put it that way.
Well, I hear a couple of key things here. One is when you see a need for creating spaces, you create it. You don't wait for somebody to create it on your behalf. I love that. And the fact is, the second thing is the ability to kind of work cross, whether it's AAJA or other groups, just not being in a silo. Like you are literally like saying, hey, I'm going to build these relationships and we're going to do something together. And then I think you just have the passion for what you're talking about and what you're doing. So that comes out, right? And it engages people. So I love that. Gigi, what about you?
How do I build constituency?
Yeah.
So we talked about that already, I thought.
In terms of constituency that's internally to Tori Richard, but what do you do outside of Tori Richard?
So I don't really have, I would have to say more on just kind of outside of work. It would just be, it's a lot of like, for example, networking, just using social media like LinkedIn. That's, I think, a big one for me to build a network. Using, other volunteering organizations. CAPAW was a really good resource for me currently. Really just reaching out to other people. I haven't, I'm definitely not as kind of involved as Erin with all the, different organizations she's in. I'm definitely trying to, do a bit, definitely do more of that. But I think, for me is really utilizing LinkedIn and expanding my network that way.
LinkedIn is very important especially I think with the pandemic, it became much more important than I think people realize. And how you build that profile and how that gets laid, it's very important. Alice, I was going to ask you if, our attendees are saying, okay, I don't have time to do 7 things, okay, for using my voice. But if you were to say, I'm going to give you one piece of advice, what you can do to make a change or make a habit, doing something now to make a difference in using your voice, what would it be?
Doing something right now. I would say break out of your comfort zone. Take a risk and go beyond a boundary that you're used to, and take that risk into the unknown, and don't be afraid because you have nothing to lose. Because it goes back to, I think it was Steve Jobs that said, that if you don't love what you do, you'll be eaten alive. And there's so many people that just end up quitting.
Yeah.
Because they just don't have that passion.
Yeah.
So in order to succeed, you have to go past that threshold of into the unknown and taking that risk. And it can be a small risk, and then it can become a bigger risk, but it can be a minuscule risk. And it can start, but the toughest part is starting.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, what's the worst that could happen? Somebody says no. That's what I learned.
Exactly. Right. And and you know what? The selling starts when they say no.
Yeah, exactly. Erin, what advice, practical, actionable thing can people do to elevate their voice?
Yeah, I think everyone's always engaged on social media, like everyone has said. I think that's important. I'd like to say something about cancel culture. There's intention versus impact. Like you could intend to share something, but the impact might be perceived a different way. So I think that's something really important to think about, especially with like your professional reputation. That's something we often don't talk about. It's like a taboo issue, right? Like only positive vibes or something, right? So elevating your issue. Yeah, I think just raw honesty, right? Because I know being intentional about our messaging, about any issue that we have, elevating our voice in that, it really has to come from a place of authenticity and values with the work that you have. And sometimes I don't post everything that I feel. I used to do that all the time because I did work in a campaign, and campaigns kind of, they control you with messaging. They have to, right? Otherwise they have to do damage control work. So try your best to breathe and have some tact when you're like trying to elevate the message. Really think critically about what it is that you're sharing. So you don't want something that you're saying to fall on deaf ears or sound angry or not constructive or reactive. So like elevating your voice is really thinking about refinement, I think, and what it is that you're trying to share in your messaging.
Absolutely. Intentionality about what it is. I always say, people can remember 3 things, but I can't remember like 7. Right? So I think that just honing it to keep the main thing. I think those are important things, especially working at corporate. That was really important. Gigi.
For me, I think, well, if in a corporate setting, stop doubting yourself. I think self-doubt is, it's definitely easier said than done, but, we're always our, biggest saboteur, right? So, you're always telling like thoughts like, oh, well, I don't want to sound stupid, or, someone else probably has the same idea already. Like that kind of thoughts, I think, would bubble up whenever you want to speak up at a business setting. for me especially too, with English being my second language, is kind of like, for a big part of my career was like, my goal is to not stand out at a meeting, right? Like just trying to hide. So I think for somebody who is kind of starting, I would say start with something small. Just, it could even just be asking a question or bringing up something, even agreeing with somebody, something that you find agreeable, but kind of adding on to it. Just little by little, just baby steps. And so with that, you started feeling like, well, that's not so hard. And then more and more you can, really start to speak your mind. And, over time, then it will become easier to sort of share your bigger ideas or even voice an objection, right? That's usually the hardest part. And I think too, when you have something that in your mind that you want to present, definitely, bounce off, use your peers, right? Use your peers, your mentor, your colleagues, someone that you can trust, bounce off ideas with them, get a sense check if you can, and, so that you can build that support and confidence once you have to be in the big meeting and present that idea that you have.
Absolutely. Preparation, right, Gigi? Absolutely. Yeah. And I love, Erin, what you said about the fact that, you don't necessarily want to post everything that you're thinking. That is probably not a good strategy.
I was like, I no longer work in campaigns. I'm just going to say everything and I don't care. And people be like, yo, are you thinking about like editing what you're saying? And I was like, no.
I need lessons from you, Erin, because like I had
angry email chains. I used to just vent like, oh,
I don't do.
When I look at some of this
social media.
Oh my gosh, we got to get you rolling on social media, Alice. But we got the network to help, right? So this is a good thing. So everyone, can you believe we're already at time? These are incredible. I told you, these are incredible leaders who are doing some amazing things in their community, in their company, their organization. And I want you to make sure you take away at least one thing you can actually do to get your voice heard and to amplify. So I hope that you enjoyed tonight's segment. And with that, thank you to my amazing, amazing panelists, my Apolli cohort 2023. Yes. And, I'm just very incredibly honored and proud to have them in our cohort. So with that, Moana.
Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful conversation. A little bit of activism, a little bit of rebellion. I'm all about that. And I really like the point that Erin made about, creating the spaces that you want to exist. I mean, that's really why this podcast exists, because I wanted to have more platforms for the Asian American Pacific Islander community. And of course, with a more of a focus and elevation for the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, because it is a minority in a minority. So thank you, ladies, my fellow Apolli sisters. Always wonderful to hear all of the great things that you all are doing. And thank you to Sue-Ann for creating this community. It is constant inspiration. And just, motivation to keep going and expanding your platforms and helping each other, as we go about our journeys in this world and where it takes us. So thank you all for joining us tonight. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Saw you guys popping in tonight. Thank you so much for listening in, and be sure to like and subscribe, share the episode if you know some folks who could appreciate this message and maybe need a little bit of fire under the butt to use their voice and take that jump, take the leap. It's okay. Like, this is a panel full of people who did it and kind of defied the odds of what we have been kind of programmed to do. So thank you all for your bravery. Next week, we are going to be talking about think we're doing reviews on the Spider-Verse movie, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm excited to see that. So we're going to a little bit of pop culture fun next week. So tune in for that. But with that said, thank you, ladies. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you guys soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Moana, Suyan, Aaron, Gigi.
Peace.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then. When they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves the Republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language was banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if we put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course, versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course, cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom, clapped back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.